The Zatar Wetlands along the Red Sea coastline possess vital natural gas resources, but create a difficult battlefield for US and MEC forces. Small tributaries break the landscape into isolated islands whose soggy marshes inhibit heavy vehicles. As American forces advance, MEC forces possess an initial advantage in the air. Control of an abandoned airfield is crucial early in the battle, after which supply line protection will become an additional consideration. This video is going to be taking an in-depth retrospective look at the Zatar Wetlands map from Battlefield 2. The map was also featured in Battlefield Online as well, but this video will only focus on the Battlefield 2 version. We'll be looking at the real-life inspirations for the map, as well as the environment and layout of the map itself. We'll also be going over the flag points and equipment that both the USMC and MEC forces have at their disposal here. Just looking at the description for the map gives us a good idea as to the real-world location that the map is based on. The keywords being in the first sentence, the Red Sea coastline. The Red Sea is located between the African and Asian continents. It is accessible by ocean from the Gulf of Aden through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And apologies in advance if I'm saying these Middle Eastern names wrong. Now, I'm going to make the assumption that the map is located somewhere along the Saudi Arabian or Yemeni coastline, given that the Middle East coalition is a coalition of, well, Middle Eastern nations. The coastal area of the Red Sea along the western edge of the Arabian Peninsula is called the Tihama. From what I can tell, this coastal plain is mostly devoid of trees and vegetation, especially the part of it that stretches along the lake of Saudi Arabia. However, when you get down close to the southwestern border, between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, we start to see more vegetation along the coastline. As we continue to look south along the Yemeni coastline, we see more trees and vegetation, and what looks to be a river delta. Although this area does not match the geography of the Zatar Wetlands map, it could act as a reference for its creation. Overall, I think we can conclude that although Zatar Wetlands is not a specific real-life location or region, it certainly seems to be a culmination of real-life environments along the western coast of Saudi Arabia and Yemen. The map itself definitely looks and feels like a wetland. Not only in the visuals, with all the vegetation and marshes that the map is largely made of, but also in the sounds of the environment as well. The number of control point locations varies depending on what size version of the map one is playing on. Zatar Wetlands has 3 map sizes, a 64-player, 32-player, and 16-player. I will be focusing on the largest version of the map, that being the 64-player, as the 32 and 16-player versions of the map are the same except that they have less control points due to their reduced play space and smaller player count. But I'll denote on the screen which control point locations are available on each versions of the map as I go through them. The 64-player version of Zatar Wetlands has a total of 9 control points on the map, 6 of which are neutral points, and 3 that represent each faction's main base. The 6 neutral control points are the airfield, the village, the factory, the central island, the natural gas station, and the farm. The 2 points for the USMC are the carrier and the beach, while the MEC just have the base. In addition to the control points, there are 9 bridges located on the map as well. Each of these bridges can also be destroyed with explosives and will require an engineer to repair them. Even if the bridges are destroyed, vehicles can still utilize the shallow areas of the river in order to go to the other islands. However, while moving through these shallow, muddy waters, vehicles will move slower, making them more prone to attacks, especially from the air. First, we'll take a look at the main bases for the United States Marine Corps, USMC, and Middle Eastern Coalition, MEC. What these locations have in common with each other is that they cannot be captured by the opposing team, and are where each team's commander support structures are located. As you can see, the USMC technically has two main bases, the carrier and the beach. As a quick side note, this carrier is actually a landing helicopter dock ship, or LHD, which, while looking similar to an aircraft carrier, is not the same. This ship is based off the USS Essex, which is a Wasp-class LHD. An actual aircraft carrier, such as the Gerald R. Ford, is larger than an LHD, and not only carries a larger number of aircraft, but also a wider variety of them as well. The primary role of an aircraft carrier during military operations is to project air power against any and all kinds of threats, whether they be land, air, or sea-based. On the other hand, the LHD's primary role is to act as a troop transport ship that specifically supports amphibious landing operations. Due to this support role, the LHD is equipped with rotary wing aircraft, such as the Black Hawk and F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. It also carries amphibious landing craft, such as the Assault Amphibious Vehicle. For the purposes of this video, I'll be referring to the LHD as a carrier, as that's what it is called in the game. The carrier in Battlefield 2 gives players access to aircraft and amphibious vehicles. On the flight deck, it spawns two F-35B Joint Strike Fighters and a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. The carrier also has two Phalanx CIWS anti-air emplacements, one at the middeck of the ship and another at the bow of the ship. Down on the back of the ship, at the stern gate, is where two RHIB or RIB boats spawn. RIB standing for Rigid Hull Inflatable Boat. These boats can be used to navigate the waters on the northern end of the map, and allow a squad to backcap MEC-controlled points. The next location for the USMC is the beach. This fishing village is where the USMC's commander support structures are located, as well as various ground vehicles. There are two main entrances into the base, one to the southwest and the other to the southeast. There are 15 huts and one fishing shack. The two huts here can be entered and used as cover for players. For the commander support structures, both the radar station and UAV trailer are located to the northeast of the beach, while the two LW-155 artillery guns are located to the southwest, near the main entrance of the beach village. As for the ground vehicles that spawn here, a LAV-25 IFV and M6 linebacker spawn in the northwest. The linebacker is a modified version of the M3A3 Bradley, which allows it to target enemy aircraft. An M1A2 Abrams tank spawns in the southeast, next to a BGM-71 tow emplacement. 3 DPVs spawn at this location, including 2 in the northeast, near a Stinger AA emplacement, and 1 in the northwest, next to an M249 LFG emplacement. Finally, a RIB spawns here, in this shack in the north of the village. The Middle Eastern Coalition Base is a large base that is a combination of the USMC carrier and beach locations, as it has an airfield right next to where the ground vehicles and commander support structures are located. There are 4 barracks in the middle, 2 bunkers at the entrance, 2 carports, 2 hangars, 8 large oil tanks, a garage, and a radio station. A fence surrounds the base, making the west and east entrances the only way to enter and leave the base. For the commander support structures, the radar station is located at the north of the base, the UAV trailer to the south of the base, and 2 D-30 artillery guns are located to the west of the base. As for the vehicles that spawn here, in the hangars to the south spawn 2 Soviet MiG-29s. Close to the center of the base is an Mi-17 HIP. Under the carports next to the Mi-17 is a BTR-90 IFV and a T-90 tank. There are 3 LYT 2021 FAVs that spawn here, 2 at the center of the base near the barracks, and 1 in front of a hangar to the right of the Mi-17. In the future, I'll just be referring to these vehicles as FAVs, as both the MEC and Chinese factions make use of these vehicles with that specific name, even though the term FAV is a general all-purpose term meaning fast attack vehicle. The last vehicle that spawns here is the Russian 2K-22 Tunguska AA vehicle in the north of the base. As for stationary weapon emplacements, there are 2 RPK LMGs in the towers at the entrance of the base, an Igla AA emplacement behind the towers, and an HJ-8 AT launcher near the barracks. Now that we've gone over the main bases of each faction, we can take a look at the neutral control points on the map, as well as the kinds of vehicles and emplacements that spawn at these points depending on which faction has control of them. This quiet little farming village is the closest control point to the MEC base. It is named such due to the nearby crop fields growing around the small village. There are 5 huts and a small fishing shack at this location. These 2 huts here can be entered and provide some cover. Low walls surround these huts of the village and only provide a limited amount of cover, whereas the high walls here provide full cover with 2 holes in the wall for troops to enter and exit through. There are 3 entrances to the farm via the main road, 1 to the south, 1 to the southwest, and 1 to the north. If the MEC captures the control point, it will spawn a T-90 tank east near the flagpole, and 2 FAVs south near the flagpole. Near the southern entrance of the farm, a BTR-90 spawns, and near the fishing shack to the southwest, 2 rib boats spawn next to the dock. If the USMC controls the point, it will spawn the respective counterparts to the MEC's vehicles in the exact same locations, those being the Abrams tank, 2 DPVs, and an LAV-25. 2 rib boats also spawn at the dock as well. Regardless of which faction controls the point, 3 stationary emplacements spawn here. 1 LMG spawns near the southern entrance, facing east, and another next to the flagpole, facing south. A stationary AT launcher also spawns close to the flagpole, also facing south. The natural gas station lies just to the west of the farm. It is recognizable by the flare towers around it and the small workers' buildings within the compound itself, which is surrounded by a metal fence. This fence has 4 holes in it that players can use to enter and exit the station. 2 of these holes are covered by wooden boards and must first be destroyed. Any explosive can get this done, whether it's a grenade, C4, or rocket launcher. There are 2 entrances into the natural gas station via the main road, one to the north and one in the south. The point has 6 buildings and 1 carport. If the MEC have control over this point, it will spawn 1 BTR-90 IFV and 1 FAV under the carport. If the USMC control the point, it will spawn the respective counterparts, those being 1 LAV-25 IFV and a DPV. Regardless of which faction controls the point, 4 stationary emplacements will spawn here. 1 AA emplacement next to the flagpole, 2 LMG emplacements, 1 to the northeast and southwest of the flagpole, facing the northern entrance, and 1 AT emplacement southeast of the flagpole, facing the southern entrance of the gas station. Another thing to note about this location are these 2 flare towers. Players looking to try and shoot down enemy aircraft with the AA emplacement would need to be careful not to lock onto the heat source at the top of these towers. These towers also have ladders that players, especially snipers, can use to get a high vantage point for long-range engagements with the enemy team. The airfield lies to the south of the beach and is the closest control point to the USMC base. In the 64-player version of the map, this airfield is abandoned, which makes it ripe for the taking for USMC forces. However, it can also be backcapped by the MEC forces in order to cut off the beach from other possible US control points, such as the village or factory. In the 32-player version of the map, the airfield acts as the USMC's main base and cannot be captured by the MEC team. This is the largest capturable control point on the map in terms of its size and space. There are 8 buildings, 2 hangars, 4 bunkers, and a carport. And most of the base is surrounded by a HESCO wall. This building to the north of the control point can be entered and used for cover. The 4 bunkers can also be used for cover as well. There are 4 main entrances into the airfield, 2 in the north, 1 in the southeast, and 1 in the south. If the USMC has control over this point, it will spawn 1 LAV-25 and 1 DPV north of the flagpole. Another DPV and an Abrams tank spawn under the carport near the southern entrance. If the MEC control the airfield, then the same MEC equivalent vehicle types will spawn in the same locations as the USMC's vehicles, those being the BTR-90, the T-90 tank, and the FAVs. Regardless of which faction controls the point, 4 stationary emplacements will spawn here. 2 LMGs will spawn in the bunkers at the southeastern entrance, 1 LMG spawns in the bunker at the northern entrance, and 1 AT emplacement will spawn right next to the flagpole in the middle, facing the southeastern entrance. The village lies to the east of the airfield. This village looks quite similar to the farm, only that it is a little bigger with more huts and surrounded by hilly terrain. There are 7 huts located around the flagpole, with 2 of them able to be entered by players in order to provide cover. There are also a few low walls and a wooded fence around a few of the buildings to provide limited cover. The village has 4 main entrances, each entrance being at the north, east, south, and west of the village. If the USMC has control over the village, it will spawn 2 DPVs and 1 LAV-25 east of the flagpole, and 1 more LAV-25 to the south, next to the docks. If the MEC control the village, then the same MEC equivalent vehicle types will spawn in the same locations, those vehicles being the BTR-90 and FAVs. Regardless of which faction controls the point, 3 stationary emplacements will spawn here. 1 LMG will spawn next to the flagpole, facing the eastern entrance to the village. Another LMG will spawn west of the flagpole, facing the northern entrance. And 1 AT emplacement will spawn next to the hut, southeast of the flagpole, and also facing the eastern entrance. The factory is located to the south of the village. This location looks similar to the natural gas station, in that it has pipes and flare towers around it, as well as being surrounded by a metal fence. What helps make this point especially recognizable, though, is the small refinery structure in the middle, with the red smokestack near the flagpole. Other structures that make up this location are the carport, and this building right here, which can be entered and used as cover. There are also these oil tanks near the center and south of the factory. The factory has 4 main entrances, 2 in the north, 1 in the west, and 1 in the south. The metal fence surrounding the factory has 4 holes in it that players can use to enter and exit through. 2 of these holes are covered by wooden boards and can be destroyed with various explosive weapons. If the USMC controls the point, it will spawn 1 LAV-25 and 1 DPV under the carport. If the MEC control the point, then the MEC equivalent vehicle types will spawn in the same locations, those vehicles being the BTR-90 and FAV. Regardless of which faction controls the point, 4 stationary emplacements will spawn here. 1 LMG will spawn north of the flagpole, next to the radio tower, facing the south entrance. Both an LMG and AT emplacement will spawn around the factory, facing the north entrance. And 1 AA emplacement will spawn on top of the refinery, next to the flagpole. Additionally, the flare tower next to the factory can be climbed, and act as a good spot for snipers. As with the natural gas station, players using the AA emplacement will have to be wary of accidentally locking onto the heat source at the top of the flare towers around the factory. Last, but certainly not least, is the central island in the middle of the map. This is the most contested point on the map, as it is located right in the center on top of a hill that provides great oversight of the wetlands below. There are 6 buildings here, 4 huts, and 2 fishing shacks. There are also 2 ruined huts, each to the west and east of the hill. This hut, and the large fishing shack, can be entered and used for cover by players. The central island has 4 main entrances, the west and east entrances along the main road, and the north and south entrances. Vehicles such as tanks and IFVs will want to stick to the entrances along the road, as the terrain of the off-road entrances is rather difficult for them to maneuver through. However, this also makes them vulnerable to mines placed on the roads by engineers. Infantry will fare better attacking up from these entrances, as they can make better use of cover while advancing. No matter which faction controls the point, either 2 DPVs or 2 FAVs will spawn here. 1 north of the flagpole and the second west of the flagpole next to this hut. But most importantly, an attack helicopter will spawn here at the helipad for each faction. For the USMC, the AH-1Z Viper will spawn. And if the MEC control the point, then the MI-28 Havoc will spawn. As for the stationary emplacements, 2 AT emplacements will spawn here, one at the east entrance near the crossroad, and one at the west entrance next to this tree. So there are a few other locations throughout the map that are not control point locations, but I do think are of interest to mention. There is a flare tower west of the factory and south of the central island that, like the other flare towers mentioned at the factory and natural gas station, can be climbed and used as a good sniping position. There is also a small ruined hut and dock to the north of that flare tower as well. North of the natural gas station is a beached shipwreck, and a small ruined hut nearby. The only way I can guess as to how this ship got here was that at one point in time the water level of the rivers was much higher than it is now, allowing for larger ships like this one to sail through. East of the village across the bridge and northwest of the central island is a Black Hawk helicopter crash site. The helicopter must have recently crashed here as there is still a fire burning within the wreckage, most likely shot down by either one of the MEC's MiG aircraft or AA emplacements. To the north of the central island across another bridge is a small village. This village is made up of 5 huts, one of them being ruined. The closest hut to the bridge can also be entered by players, thereby providing them some cover. This is pure speculation on my part, but I wonder if this village was originally intended to be a control point, as it is perfectly positioned north of the central island, and like many other control points on this map, has a bridge across the river for vehicles and troops to cross. There is also a bridge to the north of this village, but it leads to the out-of-bounds zone. If this village was a control point and was captured by the MEC, it could be a good location to act as a defensive choke point against any USMC boats or helicopters traveling along this river, trying to backcap the farm. Likewise, if the village could be captured by the USMC, it could provide them a good spawn position to attack the central island from the north, or assault the farm as well. But as it stands now, it's just another interesting location on the map. And last, to the north of the farm, are a couple of crop circles as an Easter egg for players to discover, as they fight their way across the battlefield that is Zatar Wetlands.